Welcome to our inaugural State of the Lake Houston Area Luncheon, presented by Community Impact Newspapers and First Financial Bank. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you're all healthy and safe and finding creative ways to continue doing business during this time. Since this is a lunch-in, we expect you're watching us while enjoying lunch you ordered from an area restaurant. Drop us a line in the chat comment section and give a shout out to the restaurant you ordered lunch from today. We have a great program today, beginning with a panel discussion between representatives from our two Lake Houston area cities, Humble and Kingwood City of Houston. Following the panel discussion, economist Pat Jankowski will give us an overview of the Houston area economy and a look ahead for what to expect. But first, let's recognize the sponsors for today's Lunch-In. Our co-presenting sponsors are Community Impact Newspaper and First Financial Bank. Gold sponsors are Lake Houston Family YMCA, Main Event Entertainment, Shell Federal Credit Union, and the Groves Ashlar Development. And today's silver sponsors are Community Resource Credit Union, Plains State Bank, and Sullivan's Truck, Auto, and Collision. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our first co-presenting sponsor, Emily Heineman with Community Impact Newspaper. She'll tell us what has been happening with Community Impact and introduce our panel of local experts. But before I do that, I want to let you know that we'll be taking questions from the audience today. So please type your comments and questions in the chat comments section, and we'll do our best to answer them. Emily, now on to you.
Hi, my name is Emily Heineman, and I'm the General Manager of Community Impact Newspaper here in the Lake Houston area. We are honored to co-host this luncheon with our friends and partners at First Financial Bank. I'd like to take a moment to share with you some of the ways that community impact has pivoted during this coronavirus pandemic. As a small family-owned business, we too have felt the impact of COVID-19. Our reporters are working around the clock to continue to provide you with up-to-date coverage of how this pandemic is affecting our local economy, our businesses, and our everyday lives. We're covering everything from how restaurants and retailers are innovating their businesses to how the drastic reduction of sales tax and airport travel are affecting our economy. Our May issue will be in your mailboxes this weekend, and there is so much more happening in our community than coronavirus. In addition to our timely coronavirus coverage, this issue provides updates on Woodridge Village development, Lone Star College's 2014 bond, and so much more. If you aren't yet a CI reader, we encourage you to take a few minutes and give us a read. We know that you are here today because you care about the state of Lake Houston. To continue to stay up to date, you can also become a daily CI newsletter subscriber and receive hyperlocal news delivered right to your inbox. We thank you for supporting Community Impact Newspaper, bringing us into your home, and we thank you for your readership. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our panel today, who will give us more updates on local developments, mobility projects, flood resiliency projects, and much more. Today, we are pleased to have Mayor Pro Tem Dave Martin with the City of Houston. He was first elected to Houston City Council in November of 2012, representing District E with fiscal responsibility, public safety, and economic development, serving as the cornerstone of his priorities. After being re-elected in November 2019, Mayor Sylvester Turner nominated Dave to serve as Mayor Pro Tem, and he was confirmed by City Council members. Mayor Pro Tem Martin has been a fierce advocate for flood relief and resiliency efforts in the Lake Houston area, and most notably helped lock in a Lake Conroe lowering protocol for the next 3 years to help protect our area from flooding while the gates are being built on Lake Houston. Also joining us is City Manager Jason Stubbe. Jason Stubbe has been City Manager for the City of Humble since December 2017. He has worked in municipal government since 2007, starting out in economic development before moving to administration. During his tenure, he has played a significant role in both the response and recovery to several major disasters. He has led efforts to revitalize downtown Humble, and he has worked to focus city resources on core services and infrastructure improvements and diversify the city's tax base through new development. Stubbe is very active in the chamber as a vice chair of the board, as well as the Lake Houston EDP, where he is currently serving as chairman. And now I will turn it over to our panel moderator, Mark Mitchell, president of the Lake Houston Economic Development Partnership.
Thank you very much, Emily, and we appreciate your participation here with us this morning. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you to both Dave and to Jason. We are very blessed with such good public servants. This has been managed chaos for us in the Lake Houston area for the last 3 years, and I just wanted to thank both of you on behalf of the Chamber and the EDP in terms of your service and leadership here pushing forward. In terms of state of Lake Houston and our discussion today, 2019 was actually a really good year. We had lots of growth. We had almost 6 million square feet of new development, lots of new businesses and lots of new jobs. And so I'm really excited about speaking with both of you and getting a rundown on what you see in terms of not only our infrastructure, our mobility, our sales tax, our community and economic development. We really want to talk to you about, what you saw in 2019 and what the landscape looks like moving forward. And just quickly, I want to do a microphone check for Jason and Dave just to make sure that we can both hear you on. So Jason and Dave, if you could both just say hey and hello, make sure we've got this rocking and rolling, that would be great.
Thanks, Mark. I'm here.
And Sam, it looks like Dave may still be on mute. All right, try again, Dave.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Technology is absolutely amazing,
Yeah,
sir.
great. I just had a smart aleck comment. I said, nice sports coat, Jason. Love it.
I commented earlier on the
Like Dan
nice sounding
Huberty.
color. So yeah, he's going to live with that for a while.
It is an ode to Huberty, yes.
Yes, no doubt about it.
Very good. Well, hopefully you both heard just the kudos and the
Yes.
thank yous
Thank
on
you.
behalf of the Chamber and the EDP, and then what we're going to discuss moving forward. So Dave, I'll kick this off with you in terms of our conversation and really talk about some of the big things that are going on in terms of City of Houston, in particular in the Lake Houston area. And there are two really big projects that are going on, and we briefly mentioned it in your introduction. But before we start on the two big projects that the city has got going on, I really wanted to talk to you about the Lake Conroe lowering and just your instrumental role in that, and quickly just give us a few minutes in terms of that rundown and the impact for our area, and not only for the Lake Houston area, but for City of Houston internal in terms of everything downstream.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Mark. And this is a team effort. Remember, you guys were on the forefront of this thing once we started. So thanks to the Lake Houston Chamber. It was a big win for us. I think what we'll see until we get those gates built, we have to do what I call artificial remediation. And that is the lowering of lakes, whether it's Conroe or Houston or a combination of both, in order to protect the area that we all live in and represent. So when you have the ability to proactively lower the lake in anticipation of a rain event, and to do it in a seasonal approach, as we know hurricane season comes once the summertime rolls around, I think it makes a lot of sense. And then with the ability for the city of Houston to call for the water anytime, I think that gives us another added ingredient to the plan that we developed way back when, Mark and Jenna. And y'all were on the forefront of this, as I mentioned before. So I think it's a win-win for the community. And I think we're going to see some pretty good results. The number one thing we have to see is no hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. That would be a blessing.
Right.
But thank you for the kudos.
All right. Well, thank you. And we appreciated the help. So with that said, probably the most important project that we're looking at in terms of Lake Houston is actually the gates on Lake Houston. Can you touch on that in terms of where you at, or where you're at with that, and where the city of Houston is at with that in terms of status?
Yeah, we hope to have it completed by 2022, August 2022. We hired a contractor. We hired an architect, an engineering firm, and that is Black & Veatch. That's working with the Coastal Water Authority for about the next, I would say, 9 months. They're going to develop the strategic plan along with the permits and doing all the things that we have to do in preparation for the actual construction. On the 25th of March, we just approved the appropriation of funds through the interlocal agreement with the Coastal Water Authority. And we should have a preliminary design by April 8th we had the preliminary design by April 8th, just conceptuals. So the second phase is actually the bidding of the work process. And that will be a $43 million package, and that will last for the next, let's call it 24 months. But everything's blowing and going. We expect the city to begin doing this projects optimistically at the start of 2021, and then hopefully with completion in 2022. So it's all moving fast and furious, and it is, in my opinion, the single most important project that we have in the Lake Houston area.
Right. And I know early on when we talked about the gates on Lake Houston and what that meant in the time frame, it was anywhere from a 12 to 15-year process when we started having that conversation. And the fact that collaboratively we all worked together to get that condensed down was just amazing. In terms of the residents and the folks in close proximity to Lake Houston, any words of wisdom for them over the next 12 months in terms of preparation for the construction?
I think one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we have a keen eye on the water levels in Lake Houston itself and the ability to proactively release the water. The water level is down right now. It's down about a foot in preparation for the early season that we always see in April and May. So we've taken it down a foot. And then we also have the ongoing dredging in the lake. The mechanical dredging that started in January, removed about 110,000 cubic yards of sediment. I think that all plays into what we're trying to do. So it's reducing the level of the lake, removing the sediment to build a little bit more capacity for the holding of additional rainwater that we know is coming our way. And then working with our friends at the San Jacinto River Authority to make sure that they proactively do the same things that we do. So I think it's a combination of those factors until we can get the actual gates construction and operational. And I think at that time, we'll have to look at it and see if these remediation steps need to still continue to take place. We don't think so, but we'll know once we get all the operational things going up and running.
Gotcha. Thank you. And real quickly too, before we pivot to the water, Jason, I wanted to ask you, just in terms of the city of Humble, what the lake lowering strategy means for the city of Humble too, because we talk a lot about Kingwood in terms of the devastation in Atascocita, but city of Humble was hit really hard too in terms of the flooding. And so can you just give a few words on, what the lake lowering aspect means for the city of Humble in terms of prospects going forward?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, it's everything. We're stuck between two lakes. And so anything that can be done is beneficial to us. We're really counting on the dredging to continue and the gate project to get finished, and also the partnership and the improved relationship that we have with the Jacinto River Authority. Just the increased communications, all of this, together it makes us feel a lot better about the situation, considering that we kind of are helpless where we're at. So no, it's good. We're fully in supportive of it. And as the mayor always says, what's good for Kingwood is good for Humble and vice versa.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Dave, back to the second project, and this is actually a really big project in terms of capital budgeting and just the man hours and the construction and everything else, but it's been fairly quiet in terms of just kind of community information and what's going on with it. Can you speak to, and maybe even give a little bit of history behind the construction of the water plant? And it seems like all things, in terms of the projects, are all things water related relative to the big stuff out in Lake Houston. But can you speak to the water plant construction, the huge 108-inch diameter pipe that's being installed in our area as we speak, and kind of the intent and what's that designed to do moving forward?
Yeah, that's we call it the $1.4 billion question. This water treatment facility has morphed from $500,000 to 1.4 because of the additional capacity they're adding to that water treatment facility right behind in the Summerwood area. The city of Houston is a partner in this, and we actually only have 17% of the water that's coming out of that water treatment facility. We supply water not only to the city of Houston, but to all the municipalities around us, whether it's Katy, Pearland, Pasadena, and we only take about 17% of the water. Thus, we're only accountable for 17% of the cost. What we realized is water is an extremely valuable commodity, and people are more than willing to pay for it. So, look at our friends to the north with the San Jacinto River Authority. I think one of the things that we realized after Harvey was they realized water is a valuable commodity. Thus, they want to do everything to protect their water rights. Well, we do the same thing in the city of Houston, not only for our city, but our surrounding areas. What people don't realize in Kingwood, we actually don't receive our water from the city of Houston, Lake Houston supply. We receive it from the ground. So we're a little bit different. For instance, when they had that big water main that collapsed a couple of months ago, the water was shut down to the city of Houston, but not to Kingwood because we don't get our water through the city of Houston water supply. So it's a huge project, and it's all about creating more capacity for taking water and distributing to many, many residents around the greater metropolitan area, but also making sure that we have an active water supply in lieu of any drought, because I think the magic answer we're going to see is how can we send this water to all areas outside of Houston and possibly make money from it, because it is such a valuable commodity. But it's moving fast and furious as well, and we hope to have some of the construction completed, first phase roughly around 2021, and then it fully operational a couple of years after that. It'll be a phased in approach with all the different levels.
And it looks like in terms of the diameter of the pipe and what we've seen just in the Lake Houston area, is that actually all the way going all the way to Fort Bend? I mean, is that going to be truncated down as it kind of moves to the southwest, or is that 108-inch diameter going to be from here all the way down to Fort Bend?
I don't think it goes all the way down to Fort Bend in that diameter, but certain pipes are going to go down there, and it's going to, I don't think it's the 104-inch diameter pipe. I think it's going to be a little bit smaller version, but I'm not sure of all the different nuances of the engineering side of it. But I know that we do have the ability not only to pull water from Lake Conroe and Lake Houston, but also with the Loose Bayou that's on the east fork of the San Jacinto. We have the ability to draw water from the Loose Bayou as well into the treatment facility, so that if there is any type of negative effect coming from the west fork, we have the ability to go at it from the east fork perspective. So
thank you. And then Jason, with that, let's pivot to the city of Humboldt in terms of the infrastructure landscape and what you've seen in 2019, and then kind of what is in the queue for 2020. So talk to me about some of the stuff that you've got going on, both in the kind of vertical and other infrastructure that you've got going on right now.
Yeah, so we've hit infrastructure pretty hard in the last 10, 15 years, and we're wrapping up a lot of those projects. We're working on the last sewer rehab phase 5 for that. We did just complete and commission the new 1 million gallon elevated storage tank that was necessary to improve water pressure downtown, but also to serve the mud that's going to be developing in the northwest quarter of the city. We're currently working on engineering a new force main that will expand and replace an existing force main, also to serve that northwestern quadrant, but also improve the service to businesses and residents pretty much throughout the northern part of the city. That's going to be a pretty major project for us to get that aging line replaced and improved. We've also are in the engineering phase on the improvement of Rankin Road from the railroad track to the South Houston Avenue. Of course, we're partnering friends at Jackson Shaw to improve Rankin Road from the railroad to 59. That's ongoing currently. And then we're working with TxDOT hand in hand, especially on the utility relocates as part of their 1960 expansion. So we've got a lot going on in terms of what we've got going on for Harvey mitigation. We've just kicked off the Black Improvement Project that will improve drainage behind for the neighborhood that's behind the mall. That was through the GLO. That's about a $2 million project that we hope to get underway here very, very
Home growth.
So that's what we've got cooking infrastructure wise.
And then Jason, speak real quickly too. You had mentioned the Jackson Shaw partnership. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that's something that we worked on for quite some time, and it was pretty novel in the approach and how we actually got that needed expansion done. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a great project for us and spearheaded in part by the EDP and your work as well. They needed, our thoroughfare plan dictated that Rankin Road was to be at that location, a 4-lane divided section. Jackson Shaw at the time didn't need it and their capacities didn't require it. But if everybody was going to be in there tearing something up, it might as well have gotten done during their construction phase as opposed to coming in after the fact. So we approached Jackson Shaw. They're going to be pouring an incredible amount of concrete as is, and we determined that economies of scale and given their ability to possibly bid the project out, we could split that cost, have them pretty much manage it, and we get a 4-lane boulevard that meets our future growth needs. They don't have a construction zone around them after they're completed with their construction project. We're able to split the costs, and we were able to save, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $700,000.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. And then, Jason, before we shift over, and I want to stick with you, but I think Dave has a piece of infrastructure news on Elm Grove that's actually pretty good. So I want to come back to you and start talking about development on the economic development side, both residential and commercial. But Dave, just real quickly, could you kind of weigh in on Elm Grove? I think you might have a little good piece of news for us too.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for asking that question. It was about 10:30 last night that the Commissioners Court went into executive session, and they passed unanimously the agreement to purchase the Perry Homes land, Woodridge Village land that flooded Elm Grove, North Woodland Hills, and all the areas in the north side of Kingwood that border on Montgomery County. It's one of these things you look back a year ago when we first started bringing up, what do we do about this? If you would have told me that we would have been successful, we will be successful in purchasing that land and stopping this project, I would have told you you were crazy, you were nuts, you were everything bad I could say. And what happened last night was an example of the dedication of a number of folks, including you and Jenna and the folks at the chamber, Dan Huberty, Jack Cagle, Beth Guide from Elm Grove's Homeowners Association. It was a really interesting process because, as you know, Commissioners Court is a very divided court these days. So when we first started talking to Jack Cagle about it, he would always answer me by holding up 2 fingers on one hand and 3 fingers on the other. And that was, I have 2 votes. You need to get me one of the other 3 votes. So at that time, I had to start working on my Democratic friends to go along with my Republican friends, Cagle and Raddick. And the mayor was assigned to Rodney Ellis, to Commissioner Ellis. And I was assigned to Judge Hidalgo and Adrian Garcia, who I represent jointly with Clear Lake. And we've done a number of projects together. And at first it was a challenge, and then they gave us the opportunity to present our plan. And the results of that plan came to fruition last night. There were 2 stipulations to the sale, both of which we're already working on and we agreed to a couple of weeks ago. And that was, number 1 is we need to identify within the city of Houston land that we can use for further detention within the city of Houston that has a value of $7 million. The reason why we were working off of a $14 million target. So city had to come up with $7 million in kind, and the county had to come up with $7 million, really with the total amount of dollars. And we would reimburse the county through the gift of the land for other detention through an interlocal agreement. That stipulation, we've already identified 11 pieces of land in the city of Houston. 6 of them were presented last night in executive session as very viable tracts of land near Hall's Bayou, which Commissioner Ellis was totally enthralled with. And the mayor had that conversation with the commissioner a couple of months ago, that we would look at Hall's Bayou, which is part of his district, to make sure we had the ability to do some remediation projects there. And we're working on the interlocal agreement. We have no problem adhering to the restrictions of the flooding requisitions. Matter of fact, it's going to be more construction of detention facilities in that land than is necessary. One of the things that we're looking at, Mark, is that we have a plan that not only will we build detention to hold the water up there, we're looking at a path that diverts water from Ben's Branch, diverts water from Taylor's Gully, and sends it to the Kingwood Diversion Ditch, which has a great deal of storage capacity in it. So if you look at what this land will look like, we're going to be able to protect everybody downstream along Ben's Branch, everybody downstream along Taylor's Gully, by taking this water and diverting it down the diversion ditch, which was part of the Kingwood plan way back when it was developed in the 60s and the 70s. So it's an old plan for Kingwood that's never been utilized. And we think it makes a lot of sense to have a combination of both, of diverting water to protect residents downstream and at the same time creating the detention in that particular land. And we're already working with Harris County Flood Control over the next 10 weeks to build a barrier between Elm Grove and Woodridge Village, that land that we're hopefully going to buy, to create sort of a storm wall there so the water doesn't get to us while we're doing all the construction projects. So really it's a cool project that I thought had little or no chance of getting through. And by the combination of a number of factors, and Jack Hagel was very instrumental in this as well. He led the drive, but it's a dream come true. And I think the folks in that area should be extremely appreciative as to what this plan is going to look like. It's
Well,
pretty
I'm
good.
sure, I was sure there's about 1,000 homeowners in that area that are ecstatic with you and with the county in terms of what they did. And that is a great piece of news. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Then Jason, quickly, I think we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I wanted to chat with you, and we're going to go to Q&A. And Dave, just so you know, you answered one big Ben's Branch question that's already sitting in the chat already. So I think we're square on that. But Jason, we talked about some of the residential and commercial development that's gone on, and we've got 1.2 million square feet in the queue. Anything you want to speak to in terms of both the commercial and residential development? And I'm going to quickly ask you about the sales tax issue you've been working on as well.
Yeah, so in terms of commercial development, most of our activity, the big activity, is going on in the 59 corridor. We've got 3 major players there between Archway, Jackson Shaw, and Hunt Southwest. Probably anybody that's driven around 59 has seen the monstrosity of the 600,000 square foot spec space building. But like you said, that accounts for about half of what we have on the ground at 1.2 million that's available. We are, we're excited about it, but at the same time, given everything that's going on, we don't know what's going to happen and when. So we're ranking at this point in time. But the good news is that throughout this entire thing, we're still getting plans coming in. We're still getting engineers asking questions. We're still getting developers asking questions. So I think a lot of people are getting things shovel ready and then putting it on the shelf and ready to go when they're going to feel a little bit better about the macro economy.
Okay.
So that's what we've got on the commercial side. On the residential side, we have 2 large single family residential developments in the queue. One is Townsend Landing. That'll be in the northwest quarter of the city, up in the inner city mud. That'll be 250 single family residences and townhomes kind of combined in a multi-phase approach. And then we're also looking at Harmony Cove, which is about 430 lots there at Will Clayton, just across the street from the Civic Center, in a pretty prime location. And what we're really excited about is the housing product that's being offered. They're looking at houses that are going to be in the range of 250 to 450,000, which will be huge for us to have that type of product within the Humble. And then we also have several multifamily developments that are in the queue. One being senior living, and the other one at market rate. Those also being coordinated through Skymark Development as part of their MUD. And then we continue on with downtown redevelopment and seeing a lot of activity there with the folks that are coming in and renovating houses. We've still got that program going on, and it's still being taken advantage of.
And then quickly too, just on the sales tax initiative that you and I have been talking about for the past several months, can you give us a quick just status report on that. I know we filed to have essentially a cessation for 60 days on the origination versus destination sales tax piece out of the comptroller's office. What's the status on that right now?
Yeah, so the comment period ended at the beginning of April, and right now the comptroller hasn't filed anything formal yet, but we expect him to file Rule 3.334 published very shortly. The one change that we've at least been able to, the one concession that we've been able to get from the comptroller is that it appears that there's going to be two effective dates. One effective date being July 1st, which will cover the implementation of HB 1525 and HB 2153, which addresses what I think the legislative intent was, which was the Wayfair case that would allow for an infrastructure to appropriately account for sales tax on internet sales and internet marketplace sales. The second, more controversial provisions of that rule, which pertain to the orientation of where sales tax is collected and remitted for online sales, which is what we were very concerned about. It appears that they're going to kick that implementation date to October 1st, 2021. But what that does in theory is it's really doing what we wanted and what we asked of the comptroller when we've been going to Austin before the whole pandemic settled in, was this is a legislative question that needs to be asked and answered by the legislature. And so by kicking that effective date beyond the next legislative session, it's my hope and my assumption that the legislature will take up that action and make a determination as to what is the state of Texas going to be going forward in terms of how sales taxes is originated.
Right, and that's from an economic development standpoint, that's critically important to us, and so we appreciate you monitoring that. And I'm about to get the hook from Jenna in terms of timing. So Dave and Jason, if you could just each take 60 seconds, and Dave, I'll ask you to go first just to talk about the landscape moving forward in terms of COVID-19, and then Jason, I'll ask you to do the same thing.
Thanks, Mark. It's been really interesting to be a part of the, as Mayor Pro Tem, I'm part of the executive meetings, meeting with the medical center, meeting with Harris County, meeting with everyone regarding this. And I think if you compare and contrast us to other cities, Dallas, New Orleans, even south of us in Galveston County, where they didn't issue their orders until 10 days to close down restaurants and to do social distances until 10 days after the city of Houston did. I think while you hate to lose anybody and have any life lost, we're pretty proud of the fact that we've been able to maintain our numbers at a reasonable level. The number one thing we tried to do and the objective we had was the protection of the medical center, especially the ICUs, and making sure there was no run on ICUs like we saw in New Orleans and in New York. So we think we did a pretty good job of that. My hat's off to Mayor Turner, who's been extremely involved in this from day one. And I think all the decisions that were made were really good decisions. I can't look back and say we really had a giant misstep. And I hope the people in the community appreciate that, because while other areas are suffering, we're still in pretty good shape. And we think that we'll start with our gradual opening as the governor laid out. We thought he was going to be a little bit more less restrictive than he did. We were surprised at his 25% occupancy. We thought it would move to about 50%. So I think the governor understands that we have to take this in stages and baby steps. So hats off to the mayor and the city of Houston and Harris County for leading the initiative of this. And we appreciate it.
Thank you. And then Jason?
Yeah, so we're just echoing a lot of what Dave had to say. I don't think it can be understated that no one's had to deal with a global pandemic before, and in some respects we're kind of making this up as we go along. But I think that here, especially locally, we've been doing a pretty good job of it. And it's certainly been a crazy time, but where we're at right now is following the governor's guidance and where we're at. We're looking at starting to resume normal operations here from the city, but we still have an active disaster declaration, and we're still at level 3 at the EOC, and we're going to be monitoring it. And the last thing that we want to have happen is to regress and have to do this all over again. So, for any efforts that move that along.
Well, I think the whole country is keeping a watchful eye on Georgia and how aggressive they're being. I don't think we can have any backsliding. So I think, we'll be watching that closely. And so Mayor Pro Tem Martin and City Manager Stubbe, thank you very much for the time. Thank you for your leadership. We appreciate you giving your input and valuable insights moving forward. And I'm going to kick this back to Terry Vaughn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Great information, guys. Mayor Pro Tem Martin and Jason, thank you both for being with us today. And now, on to our second segment of today's program. I'd like to recognize co-presenting sponsor of First Financial Bank. Johnny Brooks, Regional Chairman and CEO of First Financial Bank, is joining us today. Johnny will give us a quick update on the First Financial Bank and introduce our next speaker.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Johnny Brooks. I'm the Regional Chairman and CEO for First Financial Bank. And I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you folks in virtual Zoom or whatever about what's going on in the PPP program. First Financial Bank is located in Abilene, Texas. Our actual Kingwood location is off North Park and 59. The bank itself has been around for 127 years, so it's well seasoned, and it's about $8 billion in assets. It's a publicly traded bank. We came to Houston by way of Commercial State Bank, which is a bank we owned and sold to First Financial about 2 years ago. So we're glad to be part of the First Financial community. We have the size to take care of your business and the personal service to make you feel like you have a community bank. So having said that, what I thought I'd mention to you guys, talk to you guys today, is what's on everybody's mind is the Payment Protection Program, Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. As you all know, the first round closed last week. A lot of controversy in the papers, a lot of what I consider irresponsible journalism, but the facts speak for themselves. The PPP program did help the small business. From a nationwide count, there was over $1.6 million of loans that were done for the $342 billion, for 5,000 banks almost. 75% of the banks participated. In round, what that means is that of those loans, the average loan size was $206,000. That went to the small business person. We're very proud of that. Now, as far as First Financial itself, we did $645 million, almost 5,000 loans for an average size of 133. Again, our money went to the small business community where it's needed the most, not to the big companies, as you might hear. From an overall stratification of loan size, 88% of the loans were $350,000 or less from a number standpoint. And the average loan size overall was $206,000. Less than 1% were over $5 million. So we're really, you heard those numbers, but there's a small business that got the brunt of the money. Now, let's talk about round two. Round two started Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. And it's being run through what's the SBA loan system called E-Tran. As you might expect, everybody was in line trying to get the money. And 8 minutes later, E-Tran crashed. And as of now, Monday morning, it's not still back up, but hopefully it will be. So what I'm telling you from that standpoint is if you haven't gotten the queue of your bank now, you're probably going to get any money, unfortunately, because it's already taken up. It will probably be gone by the end of the week. Now, next, what I'd like to do is introduce our next speaker, Patrick Jankowski. Pat is a regional economist and vice president of research at the Greater Houston Partnership. He oversees the research department, provides information gathering, data analysis, database management, economic forecasting, and maps functions for the partnership's 5 divisions. I've known Pat for 20 plus years and always glad to hear from him. Pat is joining us today to give us an economic overview for the Greater Houston area and give some predictions for the rest of the year. Now, Patrick, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much again. I always enjoy going out to Lake Houston and visiting with you guys. The clubs, the facilities are always so nice. The people are so warm. It's just a shame. I wish I could be out there today, especially on a day like today when it's nice and sunny. But given the way things are with COVID-19, we are all making do and we're all adapting. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to present by a webinar. So let me get started and show you some insights as to what I see going on in the economy right now. Let's just start as of 11 a.m. April 27th, as we're recording this, there were just shy of 1 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States and just shy of 56,000 deaths. This has had a very severe impact on the economy. As you can see, the US GDP is expected to fall by 12% and the federal deficit to reach an outstanding $3.7 trillion. So what does that mean? We're seeing it just about every sector of the economy that you look at. Now, these are national numbers. These aren't Houston numbers. But you can see there's been a drop in durable goods orders, things that are expected to last more than 3 years. Housing starts are down. Industrial production, and these are March numbers. Industrial production consists of manufacturing, consists of the output of mines, consists of utilities. You can see that it started to drop in March. I expect we're going to see a more severe drop in April. Initial claims for unemployment insurance are up just over 20 million initial claims have been filed. 22 million initial claims have been filed in the last few months. New home sales are down, retail sales are down. The S&P from its peak, it's recovered somewhat, but it's still down over 16%. And new vehicle sales are down by a third. It's a bit of a challenge, a bit of a concern, obviously, when this happens, but Houston's economy depends upon three factors. One is oil prices, and if you've been watching the news, you know where they are now. One is the US economy, and the other is the global economy. All three of them are struggling right now. Let's look a little bit more local. Let's look at Texas. The Texas Tribune ran a headline, over 1 million people in Texas have filed for unemployment relief in the last month. Give you some idea of where those filings have been or when they started. If you look at that, the green bars shows you that same week in 2019. The red bars shows you that week this year. And you can see how the claims started to skyrocket in the middle to the late part of March. And you can just see how they've just progressed on and on and on. We're right at about 1 million claims for unemployment insurance in Texas. So the New York Times ran a headline, and the headline said, "Nowhere to hide as unemployment permeates the economy." They were talking about the US as a whole. What I wanted to show you is some data for Texas. We don't have this sort of data for Houston yet, but if you want to look at where the claims have been filed over the last few weeks, and this is for March 7th through March 11th, the data kind of lags in different data sets, but you can see that in the state of Texas, over 200,000 people who work in a restaurant, a hotel, or a bar have filed for unemployment. You can see retail trade, 123,000. Healthcare, on one hand, healthcare is very busy at the hospitals, those in the ER, and those are in the COVID wards, but there are a lot of procedures, the voluntary procedures or the elective procedures, which aren't taking place because people are trying to stay out of the hospital. And there are a lot of practitioners' office, doctor's office, and dental offices, which aren't seeing patients now. Administrative support, that's the category in which contract workers fall in, where the employment agency is placing no business in the shop, so no need for the contract workers. Other services, that's going to be the barbershops, the salons, the nail parlors, construction, so forth. You can see every sector, just about every sector has been impacted by the downturn related to COVID, and you can see pretty much where it falls out. And I say that I can't tell you about the Houston numbers yet. That's because there's a lag in the data. What I'm just showing you is unemployment insurance claims, but actual job losses, we won't know that until towards the end of May. And by the end of May, hopefully we're starting to already go back to the office, go back to the shop floor, go back to the retail shop, starting to interact with some clients. But the way the data is gathered, they ask for, when they do the survey, it's based on a survey, they ask who's on payroll in the pay period, including the 12th of the month. And so if you think about it, March 12th, we really hadn't started to see the impact yet. We'll start to see it in the first 2 weeks of April, and that data won't be available till May. So we're still trying to figure out just how severely impacted the Houston economy is. You get a little bit of an idea from that when you look at this chart right here. I know I'm not an LSU fan. I actually went to UT, but the LSU fans may like this chart. The yellow bar shows you the number of claims filed in the metropolitan area, Houston metropolitan area last year. The purple bars show you how many were filed this year, and you can just see the significant increase in the number of claims that have been filed. Now, you add all those numbers together, we're right at 400,000 initial claims for unemployment insurance that have been filed since the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak. And not actually since the beginning of the outbreak, but the beginning of when we started putting in social distancing, the work safe, be safe, the shutting down of the restaurants and the retail and so forth. You want to see how that tracks over time. You can see this is cumulative. The bottom line is cumulative from last year. The blue line is cumulative from this year. And you can see that we are right at 400,000 claims cumulative so far this year. So unemployment, I get the question asked quite frequently is what is the unemployment going to be, how high is it going to get? And it's really kind of hard to tell because we're still working with incomplete data. In March, the unemployment rate was 5.1%. And you need to understand the unemployment rate is calculated based on how many people are in the workforce. And if you're looking for work, you're considered in the workforce. If you're not looking for work, you're not in the workforce. And so we might not see the unemployment rate go up as high as we anticipate because there's some people simply may say, things are so bad out there, I'm not going to look for work until things get better. So they're not in the workforce. They're not counted as unemployed. But I just did some what if. If we lose 100,000 jobs, which I'm definitely sure we have since March, that would send the unemployment rate up to 8%. If we've lost 200,000 jobs, that would send the unemployment rate up to just under 11%. And if all things being equal, if people remain in the workforce, and it turns out we've lost 300,000 jobs and they're still looking, that would put us at 13.8%. 400,000 jobs lost would put us at an unemployment rate of about 16.7%. That would be the highest on record for Houston. That would be worse even than the downturn that we had in the 80s. But once again, this assumes that there's no change in the size of the workforce, that people continue to be looking for work and they don't simply pull back and say, I'm not going to look for work, I'm not going to enter the workforce. If we have a bunch of people who simply say they're going to take this as a hiatus, the size of the workforce goes down, the number of unemployed goes down. But I'm real comfortable feeling that right now we are probably at an unemployment rate somewhere between 13 and 7%. We are at an unemployment rate in the low to mid-teens, and I hope it doesn't go any higher than that. So let's talk about gross domestic product. It's another general measure out there. Houston's gross domestic product is roughly about $500 billion. It's a little bit higher actually during the middle part of the decade when we had the thriving oil and gas industry, and it's dropped to just a little bit below that the last few years. The partnership has not run a forecast for changes in GDP, but there is an economist, someone that some of you guys may know. His name is Ray Perryman. He's actually been studying and forecasting this economy since the early 80s. He's got 40 years of looking at it. And he's put together a forecast for the Houston metropolitan area. And you'll see it right here. And this is what Ray Perryman from the Perryman Group is forecasting is going to happen in Houston over the next 2 years. Or actually, this is not over the next 2 years. It's simply saying where we're going to be this year. The biggest hit, it's going to be in mining. And mining is the category in which oil and gas falls in. If you think about it, when you're extracting oil and gas from the ground or from deep below ground, you are actually pulling, you are mining, you are pulling a mineral, a substance out of the earth. Manufacturing, much of that related to the oil and gas industry. You can see the drop off there, retail, wholesale. Other services, once again, that's the sector in which all the hair salons, the beauty parlors, barbershops, funeral parlors, and that's kind of a catch-all for anything that doesn't fit in these other categories. Transportation and warehousing, you can see it dropping off and so forth. So we're looking at about a 50, according to Ray Perryman estimates, about a $50 billion hit to the economy. That's just under 10% that we expect loss this year. He expects us to pick up most of that in 2021, but we'll still fall below where we were prior to the downturn. The same thing with employment. Fairman's forecast is actually for the Houston region to lose 226,000 jobs in 2019. He's actually ratcheted that back a little bit. And the forecast that he put out the prior month, he thought Houston would lose about 282,000. So things don't look quite as bad, but still, anytime you finish up the year with 226,000 jobs less than you had when you start with, that's a pretty severe hit. Let's go on. We've been running some surveys at the partnership, trying to get some understanding of what's going on in the community so we can better work with our elected officials, the better work with the business community, the better we can serve our members. We've been running the survey Mondays and Tuesdays for the last 4 weeks. We're in the 4th week today. The survey's gone out. We'll get the results back in and analyzed and posted on the partnership's website by Wednesday or Thursday. But when we did the survey, 62% of the restaurants, the hotels, and the bars said that we surveyed said they've shut down either their entire operations or at least some part of their operations. If you go to the retail, wholesale, transportation sector, a third of them have. Actually, fewer have done it in wholesale and transportation, which is kind of offsetting retail. Retail, it's much more than that. If you look at the nonprofit, the government sector, the goods producers, and so forth. Through the first 3 weeks, the only companies that have not wholly or shut down their operations are those who are the energy companies. They've been managed to work remotely from home for the most part, but we are starting to see other stress in that sector. If you go through and you look at those who've instituted layoffs or furloughs, a layoff means the people have been let go. The furlough is they've been let go, but you hope to bring them back at a later date. And you can see pretty much across the board, everyone has either furloughed or laid off employees. You can go to the energy sector there, already starting to see the furloughs and layoffs there at the bottom. But there's not a sector in the Houston economy that has not laid off somebody or has not furloughed somebody, as you can see from those percentages there. Another response to the downturn has been reduced wages. You've seen it probably in the papers where there's some CEOs who said they simply won't take a salary. Others have drastically reduced the salaries of the officers and then somewhat reduced the salaries of the rank and file. It's not uncommon to see companies which have reduced wages 10 to 25% as a way to conserve cash just to try to get through this downturn. So actually what we have is something which people, economists and philosophers refer to as a black swan event. We actually have a double black swan event. A black swan event is usually, it's considered something which is extremely rare. It's unpredictable. It has a severe impact. And maybe in hindsight, maybe you saw it coming. But probably the biggest way to describe a black swan event is it's extremely unpredictable, extremely rare. It has a severe impact. One of the black swans is this outbreak of COVID-19 and the impact it's had on the economy. The other is what we're seeing happen to the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is going through the worst downturn ever in its history. The world consumes approximately, prior to the downturn, the world was consuming 100 million barrels a day. I'll repeat that. Yes, we were consuming close to 100 million barrels a day globally. That's been cut by 30%. So there's another 30 million barrels a day out there that has not stopped. The production has not been shut in yet. It's slowly being shut in. That's going into storage. That's the reason why this time last week you heard these stories about negative oil prices, because people had contracts and they had no place to put the oil that they had under contract. And we're going to continue to be overproducing oil, which is going to continue to put down prices until we start to pull more oil out of production, shut in wells, or until demand starts to pick back up. And we won't see demand picking up until the economy gets going again. You can see what's happened to the spot price of West Texas Intermediate. You can see how it went negative last Monday. The concern is if we don't find places to store the oil, and a lot of the storage is already spoken for, it'll continue to go negative. You can see what's happened with the rig count. Boy, it would be nice to get back up to 2,000 rigs again like we had in 2014. But back then, the rig count fell as low as 404 rigs. It's barely above that now. I really suspect we're going to get a rig count below 400. We'll get a rig count probably around 350 before this is all done with. And if you're not drilling wells, then you're not going to need the crews out there in the field drilling the wells. You know, there's an expression out there in the oil and gas industry, the closer you are to the drill bit, the more your job is at risk in a downturn. We're already seeing the layoffs out in the field. We're starting to see them in the equipment manufacturers, because if you're not drilling wells, you don't need new rigs, you don't even need replacement parts. And at some point, you're going to realize you don't need as many people in the office supervising the people out in the field. So we're going to start seeing some layoffs in the white collar side as well. They're already taking place in the blue collar side. As I read reports, as I talk to people in the industry, as I listen to anecdotal evidence, a lot of companies, what they're trying to do is hang on, at least for the next 12 to 18 months. They're hoping that things will get a little better. And you're going to see some companies reduce down to, in essence, a skeleton operation. Try to get by, try to maintain just enough cash flow to service their debt and just enough cash flow to pay the bills, so that when oil prices rebound, they might be able to start drilling again or working again. Give you an idea how severe it is. This, what you're looking at on the chart right now, is U.S. refinery capacity utilization. And normally a refinery likes to run above 90%. You know, it's very rare they ever get up to 100%, because you always have bottlenecks, you always have issues. But you want to operate at 90% or better because of the drop off in demand for refined products, for gasoline, for aviation fuel, for diesel. You're seeing that the demand has dropped significantly. The refineries in the U.S. are only operating at about 2/3 of their design capacity. That may fall even further, because just no one is consuming the fuel. And anecdotally, I have filled my tank up. I drive a Ram 1500. I've filled my tank up once in the last 4 weeks, because I'm driving so little. It isn't until we get back to work and people start driving around and going on trips and business gets back up, we'll start to see demand pick back up. You know, I think Chris Tomlinson had it well, that this oil collapse signals a long-running crisis for Texas. It's going to take a while before we get back to normal, if we ever get back to normal. With oil trading below $20 a barrel, this is a survey I've probably shown you guys in the past. It's a survey done by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. It asks what WTI oil price does your firm need to cover operating expenses? Right now, with the way oil is trading below 20, the companies aren't even making enough money to cover the operating costs of that well. So they're losing money on every barrel of oil they produce. So what they're looking at is they're trying to figure out if there's a way to shut in production, to shut down the well without damaging the well, without damaging the reservoir, hoping that they'll be able to bring it back online when prices get back up. So we know they're not making enough money to cover operating costs. So they're definitely not making enough money to cover exploration costs. This is a survey that was done just a few weeks ago. And you can see most companies in the US need a price anywhere between $46 and $52 a barrel to profitably produce oil. And so you're not going to be seeing any exploration. That shows you why the graph I showed you just a few slides back shows you why the rig count has fallen so much. But one of the really big concerns is that we're not going to see a change in oil prices for quite some time. This is something I pulled off Yahoo just last night. It's showing the future price of oil 2 years from now. We're looking at oil prices perhaps still being below $40 a barrel. If oil prices remain below $40 a barrel, we're going to see a lot less drilling, if any drilling at all. You're going to see companies, you will see bankruptcies. You will see the industry get a lot smaller. They're not even going to have enough money to service their debts. This is something that Tudor, Pickering, and Holt put together. And it's showing the amount of debt that's maturing over the next 5 years. And you can see next year alone, there's going to be $10 billion in debt that matures for the oil and gas firms, and almost $15 billion in 2020. And so if oil prices don't get up higher, companies are not going to be able to service their debt. You're going to see bankruptcies. You're going to see companies close up shop. Now, what some firms are trying to do is go to their bondholders or and let them know that they'll be willing to buy the bonds back at less than what they owe them. And some of the companies are willing to accept that because they'd rather get some money than no money later on. But with all this debt coming due, with oil prices so low, we're in a situation where we could potentially see some significant bankruptcies towards the end of the year. Let's hope oil prices get up high enough so that doesn't take place. So what can we expect? Well, I really expect crude to remain below $30 through mid-year. I'm hoping it gets up above $20. But that's still not going to be enough, maybe enough to cover operating costs, but not enough to spur any exploration. We expect CapEx budgets, exploration budgets to be cut 50% or more. That may even seem optimistic now. The rig count's going to fall below the levels of the fracking bust. Production will eventually start to fall because we're not bringing any more shale wells online. They tend to flat fairly quickly. We'd gain back about 30,000 of the jobs that we lost, about a third of the jobs that we lost in the fracking bust of 15 and 16. I'm afraid we're going to give all those back. I really expect us to lose 10 to 15 to 20% of the jobs in the industry again. And the industry that we're going to see 2 years from now is going to be much leaner and much smaller. So I know it's been kind of depressing, everything I said, so I need to give you some ray of sunshine, some reasons to be optimistic. And that is, the Fed's looking at it, and they're expecting growth to start returning in the second half of the year. This is Kaplan, the president of the Fed in Dallas. He gave an interview, said he expect growth to return in the second half, but worried about cautiousness of consumers. There was a survey done at Wall Street by the Wall Street Journal of a bunch of economists out there. There are 70 of them that work for different associations, different corporations. About 44% said they thought that the recovery would begin in the third quarter. Another 44% said in the fourth quarter. The point is hopefully by the fourth quarter, based on either one of those two responses, we should be in the recovery. The concern is how much pain are we going to endure before then? The question was asked, what does the recovery look like? The same group of economists, and about 40% expect it to be a V-shaped recovery with a sharp drop followed by a sharp rebound. I'll let you know, I'm not in that camp. I don't think this is going to be a sharp rebound. I think people are going to be reluctant to go back out. I think we've destroyed an awful lot of jobs and a lot of demand out there. I think we'll probably be more like a U-shaped recovery, but I do see a recovery sometime towards the end of the year. And it's real important. As I said, we do a lot of surveys at the partnership, and the Great Eastern Partnership, we did a reopen survey, and we asked what % of the operations are active. Just go to that far left purple bar, and the way you read that is that 27.9%, about only a fourth of the respondents to our survey said they're 100% operational. You go to this far right-hand side, and you look at those two bars, you can look at it, another fourth said they're less than 50% operational. So it is important that we get businesses back open and operating again, because we can't keep on working remotely. Once again, you go to this far left-hand side, that bar, that green bar that says 100%, 12%, the way you read that is only 12% of the firms that we survey said that 100% of their employees continue to work remotely even after we reopened. Go to that far right-hand side, it just shows you that 35% of the firms say that only a fourth of their employees can continue to work remotely. So we really need to get people back out there working. The concern is, what do we need? We asked in the survey again, what do you need to fully reopen your organization? What do you need to be comfortable reopening your organization? And we gave a list of about 12 options. We told the respondents they could check all that apply. The one that was at the top of the list was this universal testing for COVID-19. Comes up time and time again that we really need to see that to reopen. The other one was ending current social distancing restrictions. And I want you to interpret that two ways. On one hand, operations like retail or restaurants or bars are those which we identified, we refer to as high touch, high social interaction. Social distancing restrictions need to be somehow eased for them to operate, but also step back and look at it, whether you're a manufacturer and office operations. It's kind of like the all clear sign. It's like after the storm, after a hurricane, you go out and you see the blue sky, you know it's safe to come out, or after an air raid, or maybe a little bit more graphic one, you hear the second warning, the second air raid siren tells you it's okay to come out. If we end social distancing restrictions, it kind of sends a signal that things are better and it's okay to go out there with universal testing. And you can see the others, the access to personal protective equipment, access to capital, the other issues. And childcare still remains a top issue for people to be able to go back. A lot of childcares are closed and remain closed. And I know personally from some of the people on my research team have had to juggle childcare responsibilities with their own work responsibilities to try to remain productive at home. So yeah, you're looking at an old guy on the screen. That's Robert Baden-Powell. Yes, I was a Boy Scout. I was also a Scoutmaster. The sort of things that he taught have served me well and hopefully served the boys that I worked with well. But the Boy Scout motto was, be prepared. And someone asked Baden-Powell, well, what should we be prepared for? And he said, well, we should be prepared for just about anything. And that gets into my presentation, because if you want to know what we should be prepared for just about anything which may happen over the next 6 weeks, over the next 6 months. Hopefully, with social distancing, hopefully having a better understanding, hopefully a virus, we can manage these things better. But we should really be prepared, because there's still a lot of unknowns out there. With that, I really want to thank you guys for allowing me to present again. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Terry Vaughn, your chair for this year, and he's going to go ahead and wrap up the program. Everybody be safe, be healthy, and I look forward to hopefully this time next year standing in one of those wonderful country clubs that you guys have out there and being able to make this presentation in person with another beautiful day like this. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Pat, for spending time with us today and giving us information we need to know. And that concludes our lunch-in today. I'd like to recognize our sponsors one last time. Our co-presenting sponsors are Community Impact Newspaper, First Financial Bank. Gold sponsors are Lake Houston Family YMCA, Main Event Entertainment, Shell Federal Credit Union, and the Groves Ashlar Development. And today's silver sponsors are Community Resource Credit Union, Plain State Bank, and Sullivan's Truck, Auto, and Collision. Additionally, we would like to thank our elite and executive members. The Chamber is here to help each of you as you work to get back to business. If we can be of any assistance to you, please contact us at 281-446-2128 or email chamber@lakehouston.org. We appreciate you being part of our lunch-in today, and we'd like to invite you to participate with us again on Tuesday, May the 5th, for our Focus on Federal lunch-in. We will have Congressman Kevin Brady as our guest speaker. Then again on Thursday, May 21st, we will have our Humble BizCom. And that concludes our lunch-in today. Special thanks to DNA Studios for providing our studio. We love you with an inspirational, we will leave you, man, we love you. We do love you, Sam and DNA Studios, but we leave you with an inspirational video before you log off.
You don't have a job, won't pay your bills, won't buy you a home in Beverly Hills. Won't fix your life in 5 easy steps. Ain't the law of the land or the government. But it's all you need, and love will hold us together, make us a shelter when the storm, and I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. It's waiting for you, knocking at your door. In the moment of truth, when your heart hits the floor, when you're on your knees. And love will hold us together, make us a shelter, weather the storm. And I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first day of the rest of your life. 'Cause even in the dark, you can still see the light. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first day of the rest of your life. 'Cause even in the dark, you can still see the light. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. And love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm. And I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not